I'm JB, the storyteller. I live in Australia, so I'm going to tell you a story from Australia. It's called The Hobyahs. Once upon a time, creatures of the night roamed the Australian bush. And in the bush where the Hobyahs lurked, there was an old bark hut, a humpy. And in the humpy lived a little old man and a little old woman. And they had a little yellow dingo, who was the best guard dog anyone could hope to have. One night, the Hobyahs came, out from the gloomy gullies, creep, creep, creeping, through the grey gum trees, run, run, running, in the ghostly moonlight, creep, creep, creeping. The Hobyahs said, Hobyah, 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 pull down the hut, eat up the little old man, carry off the little old woman. But little yellow dingo knew the Hobyahs were there, so he howled and howled and howled, and the Hobyahs were so frightened they turned and ran away home as fast as they could. But the little old man was angry. Dingo's howling had woken him up. Ah, that dingo, he said, and his howling keeps me awake all night. If I make it through this night, I shall chop off his tail. So in the morning, the little old man chopped off Dingo's tail. And that night, the Hobyahs came again, out from the gloomy gullies, creep, creep, creeping, through the grey gum trees, run, run, running, in the ghostly moonlight, skip, skip, skipping on the tips of their toes. And the Hobyahs said, Hobyah, 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 pull down the hut, eat up the little old man, carry off the little old woman. But little yellow dingo knew the Hobyahs were there, so he howled and howled and howled, and the Hobyahs were so frightened they turned and ran. But the little old man once again had been woken up, and he was angry. That dingo and his howling, I've had enough of him, really, I can't sleep. In the morning I shall chop off one of his legs. So in the morning, the little old man chopped off one of Dingo's legs. And that night, the Hobyahs came again, out from the gloomy gullies, creep, creep, creeping, through the grey gum trees, run, run, running, in the ghostly moonlight, skip, skip, skipping on the tips of their toes. And the Hobyahs said, pull down the hut, eat up the little old man, carry off the little old woman. But little yellow dingo knew the Hobyahs were there, so he howled and howled and howled, and those Hobyahs turned and ran back to the gloomy gullies, back to their home. But his howling had woken up the little old man. That dingo howling all night, how can I get any sleep? He said. In the morning I shall chop off the rest of his legs. So in the morning the little old man chopped off the rest of Dingo's legs. That night the Hobyahs came again, out from the gloomy gullies, creep, creep, creeping, through the grey gum trees, run, run, running, in the ghostly moonlight, skip, skip, skipping on the tips of their toes. And the Hobyahs said, Hobyah, 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 pull down the hut, eat up the little old man, carry off the little old woman. But Dingo knew the Hobyahs were there, so he howled and howled and howled, and the Hobyahs turned and ran as fast as they could. But the little old man was so angry he sat up in his bed. That dingo and his howling, I've had enough. In the morning I shall chop off his head. So in the morning the little old man chopped off Dingo's head. That night the Hobyahs came once more, out from the gloomy gullies, creep, creep, creeping, through the grey gum trees, run, run, running, in the ghostly moonlight, skip, skip, skipping on the tips of their toes. And the Hobyahs said, Hobyah, 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 pull down the hut, eat up the little old man, carry off the little old woman. And because Dingo could not howl any more, the Hobyahs pulled down the hut. They didn't eat up the little old man because he ran away and hid behind a tree, but they carried off the little old woman in a sack, and they carried her through the gum trees down to the gloomy gullies, and they hung that sack on a hook, and they poked at it with their long, skinny fingers. Ha 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 ha! Little old woman, what a tasty meal you'll make! And then, because the sun was coming up, the Hobyahs went to sleep, because Hobyahs sleep all day long. Now when the old man saw that the little old woman had been taken, he was sorry. He realized why Dingo had been barking or howling, and he realized what a good guard dog Dingo was. And so, because this was long ago, back in the days of magic, the little old man put Dingo back together again. He gave Dingo back his tail, he gave Dingo back all of his legs, and he gave Dingo back his head. Dingo was all one piece again, and he sniffed the air, and he caught the scent of those Hobyahs, and he went straight down to the gloomy gullies where the Hobyahs lived, and, well, the Hobyahs were fast asleep. The little old woman was in the sack crying, so Dingo used his sharp teeth to open up the bag. Out jumped the little old woman, and she ran away as fast as she could, but Dingo did not run away. Dingo climbed into that sack and waited. And when the sun went down, the Hobyahs woke up, and they poked at that sack with their long, skinny fingers. Ha ha ha! Little old woman, it's time to eat you up. But out of the sack jumped little yellow Dingo, and he ate up every one of those Hobyahs. And that is why there are no Hobyahs today. So if you venture out into the Australian bush at night, you need not be afraid of Hobyahs. But keep a careful lookout for other creatures of the night. Thank you.